Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's February 24th, and we're here at the House Economic Matters Committee. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone who's listening or participating that the chat is only for members. So please do not enter anything to the chat. I ask that you keep yourself muted until you're asked to be unmuted or someone unmute you. Again, the chat is only for the members. We have a multitude of bills today. We would start with the venerable chair of the judiciary, Delegate Luke Clippinger. And I would also like to remind everyone that you will have 2 minutes. Again, you'll have 2 minutes to testify on in support of a bill. However, in economic matters, we do not time our colleagues. We believe that their information that they have to share is important. As such, Chairman Clippinger, take all the time that you need, sir.
Chair Wilson, thank you ever so much for that committee. This is the last time I'm going to be in front of you this year. And Chair Wilson forgot to mention that there'll be a small party afterwards after the testimony on this bill for that reason. This is House Bill 818. Thank you all very much for your attention. And I'll try and stay under 2 minutes, actually. We passed, as everyone here should know by now, we passed the community solar pilot in 2015. The idea behind community solar is that we give people who don't have the ability to put solar on their own houses the ability to purchase or procure in some way part of a solar array at another location and then use the electricity that's generated off those solar panels to run against their electric bills as if they had panels on their own houses. One of the ideas fundamental to the program was that the idea that it should and can be seamless. And in other states across the country, it has been more seamless. However, as we come closer to what I hope will be the end of the pilot and to the full adoption of the program, we do need to remove one of the impediments that it's making it harder for low and moderate income Marylanders to get involved with community solar. And that is the inability for many of them to engage in consolidated billing with their community solar provider and their utility. So this bill states, I won't read the bill, but it allows for a subscriber organization for community solar. It says they may participate in consolidated billing with the utility. It'll make it easier for low and moderate income people to participate. And then that was one of the biggest goals of community solar when we passed it. I think we're going to hear from several witnesses. I know Lynn Heller and Al Bartlett are here. I know that Laurel Peltier is here as well. You'll hear from them. And with that, Mr. Chair, I think I kept it under 2 minutes and that should be fine.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And while we do have a list of people testifying on your bill, I did notice that you have what would be called a panel. And because of your magnificence, we'll make sure that we go on your list first, and then we'll go to mine. So the first person we would like to call up to testify, which is on our chairman's panel, is Lynn Heller.
Chairman Wilson and members of the committee, thank you. For the record, my name is Lynn Heller. I'm the founder and CEO of the Climate Access Fund, which is a statewide nonprofit green bank that focuses on increasing low-income access to solar power. I'm also honored to serve as board chair of the Maryland League of Conservation Voters. The Climate Access Fund strongly supports this bill, and we thank Delegate Clippinger for his leadership. As you know, community solar allows Maryland residents to pay for solar power generated somewhere other than on their rooftops and get credit on their utility bills. The legislation includes a 30% carve out for low to moderate income customers who can save 20 to 25% on their electricity bills by participating. Yet to date, most community solar projects do not serve low income customers. This is because it's generally more expensive for developers to market to low-income households who may not be able to overcome existing barriers to participation, such as the lack of consolidated billing. So what is utility consolidated billing? It's the mechanism by which households only have to pay one bill to their utility for their electricity, regardless of who generates the power, and the utility then pays the electricity supplier. Utility consolidated billing currently exists in Maryland for third-party electricity suppliers, but not for community solar suppliers. Community solar customers, therefore, have to pay two separate bills, one to the utility and one to the community solar supplier. While dual billing is a nuisance for many, it's prohibitive for some. Low-income households who do not have credit cards or bank accounts can't participate in community solar because the companies that handle the billing don't have the capacity to accept payments by check or cash. Utilities, on the other hand, can even accept cash paid by customers at supermarkets and pharmacies. If we had consolidated billing for community solar, low-income households could pay one bill for their electricity by whatever means work best for them. As Delegate Clippinger said, expanding clean energy access to low-income households was a large part of the reason for the creation of the community solar program, but the lack of consolidated billing limits low-income participation. Our utilities already offer consolidated billing to some. They simply need to extend it to all. I strongly encourage a favorable report, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Seeing no questions, we'll go on to Al Bartlett.
Thank you, Chairman Wilson, Vice Chairman Crosby, members of the committee. I'm Dr. Alfred Bartlett. I'm a board member and energy policy lead with Chesapeake Physicians for Social Responsibility. I'm a member of the PSC's Community Solar Working Group and also the subgroup led by Ms. Heller, focused on low and moderate income or LMI households. As Ms. Heller said, one reason LMI project development is lagged behind is that the regulations require community solar to be billed separately from a customer's electric utility bill. One critical problem this creates is that this dual billing turns out to be incompatible with energy assistance to low-income families through the Office of Home Energy Programs, or OHEP. OHEP's energy assistance payments are only made to the customer's utility. With separate billing, this assistance can't be shared with the community solar provider. So, if a low-income household receiving energy assistance signs up for community solar, when the amount owed to the utility becomes less than their energy assistance amount, as it will, the balance can't be applied to their community solar bill. The household still pays that bill separately, so they lose part of their energy assistance and, even with solar discounts, can pay more overall than they would on just standard utility service. Community solar providers are aware of this problem, so some avoid enrolling families on energy assistance, and others try enrolling them for small amounts of solar, but the extra complexity and the small benefit make this not very successful. So it's a real barrier to lowest income families participating. The working group, the utilities, MEA, OPC, and OHEP haven't found a non-legislative solution. It requires HB 818, simply allowing community solar providers to participate in the same billing mechanism already used for our more than 120 third-party suppliers. That is, utility consolidated billing, a single bill that pays both providers. It's a simple solution to a real energy justice problem, and we urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Seeing no questions, we'll move on to Cindy Carter.
Good afternoon, Chairman Wilson and committee. I'm Cindy Carter. I'm the co-founder of the Critical Medical Needs Program and Executive Director of Cancer Support Foundation. I'm here today in favor of House Bill 818. The segment of our population that would be hurt the most, the way this sits right now, that we want to correct with this bill, is our seniors. Why is that? Well, 41% of everybody in the state of Maryland that is eligible for the energy assistance grants are seniors, many of them in rural areas. Let me give you an example. If I have a client who's 70 years old and she wants to be able to age safely in place, and she feels that the community solar program will help her, if she enrolls in that, then come July, when she can get her annual energy assistance grants, she's going to have a big problem, because let's say the energy assistance grants this year would be $1,500. If she enrolls in the solar energy, she's in a situation where that $1,500 she's not going to be able to make effective use of. So we put her in a situation of choosing between the community solar program or getting the full amount of her energy assistance grants. This is counterproductive. I would think that if in Maryland we're really serious about helping seniors age safely in place, we would get this taken care of and make the billing where this woman could take advantage of both programs. I'm asking for a favorable report on House Bill 818. Thank you.
Seeing some questions, Delegate Queen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hope this was the end of the panel, so it's a general question
Yes.
for the sponsor of the bill. This seems like a reasonable bill. My only question is related to the Public Service Commission's comment about there's some technical issues and waiting after the pilot. Are you familiar with that letter of info that they provided?
I'm familiar with their letter of information, and I did talk to Lisa Smith from the PSC. And I'll just say, I will say that I know that there are people on the PSC and some of the staff of the PSC who've been working on community solar quite hard. And as Dr. Bartlett indicated, he's on the panel that sort of is the working group for community solar. This has been an issue that, as was mentioned, that they have not been able to tackle. And I think it's an important issue that really does go to the accessibility of the program. And so I understand that they would require some assistance, but at the same time, I believe that this is a very important piece of this that really needs to be resolved, and certainly needs to be resolved as we look to make this program permanent.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Delegate Queen.
Doug Sarkoudian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chair Clippinger, for bringing this bill and to all the advocates who came to speak for it. I do think this is crucial. With the reason we created community solar in this state is because it was supposed to make solar accessible to everybody, but a priority was making it accessible to low-income people. And I'm really concerned that the process as it has sort of come out in the PSC with the utilities participating in that work group has at every turn slowed the implementation of community solar down and cut off its ability to really achieve some of the original goals in your original legislation, Chair Clippinger. And I'm looking, it looks like the utilities have submitted written testimony in opposition to this, and they have not come, they won't be here with oral testimony, so I don't have the ability to ask them this. Their testimony, I just need to say, is really vague. It says things like, it seems unnecessary and the pilot's about to end, so we can just wait. There's a lot of work involved. So I'm sure that is the case, that there's a lot of work involved and that the pilot is about to end. But I think we're pretty clear that we're going to extend this pilot and that this is crucial for the goals of community solar to be realized. And so I don't know if any of you who have been part of the conversations in the work group, this might be for you, Mr. Bartlett, want to talk more about really that, it's my sense that this isn't a huge hurdle. It's crucial for justice in this work, but it's not a huge hurdle. And if you can say more about the sort of opposition or slowing down that you've seen from the utilities at the Public Service Commission and why it's necessary for us really to push this in this context legislatively.
Thank you, Delegate Charkoudian. Let me just say a couple of things. One, this matter was actually raised last March, almost a year ago, in a preliminary rulemaking hearing, which actually ended in August. But since that March session, this issue of the problem with energy assistance and not being able to be fully utilized by people on community solar, and therefore being a barrier, has been discussed in multiple meetings with all those agencies I listed, with MEA, with OPC, with the PSC obviously itself and the working group, and with the utilities. And despite characteristically laborious processes and MEA actually working out scenarios that basically demonstrated with real numbers that this was true, that families that got community solar and stayed on and were on energy assistance would actually end up losing money in the deal and would end up paying overall more if you total their solar and the utility bill. But nobody's been able to come up with a solution. And the conclusion is that this is a legislative fix. And so that's one point I would make. The other is, yes, the program has moved more slowly than we want. But this one, if we don't fix this now, it's going to be a barrier whether we go to a full program or not. This has proven to be and there are some other panelists that will talk about other ways that this causes problems for low-income people who don't have credit cards and bank accounts. This has become a significant barrier to low-income participation. And so we need to fix it. And there's no reason not to fix it now. There already are cases of people who haven't been able to participate because of this issue. So there's no reason to wait.
All right, so thank you very much. That was a weirdly open-ended question. Hopefully you're able to get everything out that you needed. I think we have Delegate Arentz next.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman Clippinger, just real quickly, when you look at these bills, and the PSC has come out with a statement saying that too fast, and so is BG&E, with all the things we're trying to do with clean energy, renewables, and with this type of energy, do you think it might behoove us to take a harder look at what they're saying? Because there's a lot of moving parts in this, and you look at where Maryland's at as far as our clean energy portfolio and what we're trying to accomplish. We can't even keep up with what our goals are today. We're far behind as far as everything's stated. So wouldn't it behoove us to take a harder look at what they're saying and maybe include that in this bill?
Well, I'd say that the way that we're going to be able to really expand our ability to meet those goals is if we can expand the number of people who are actually able to participate in generating the electricity. The PSC has been certainly working on the regulations and has been working on issues related to community solar since pretty much 2015. And I will say that along the way, although again, with respect to the people who have been working on issues related to community solar, the missed deadlines become as routine as almost anything else. And so to that end, I think that it's important for us to really to have a focus within the PSC, really pushing these issues to the fore and addressing these issues and addressing them quickly so that we can address the broader issues that we're trying to reach and the goals that we're trying to reach. But I hear what you're saying, and there's no question that there are challenges with this. There are challenges with how we address these issues, and certainly challenges that we're going to have to look at when we take this program and make it permanent here over the next couple of years. And so, certainly hope to be part of that larger conversation too. But this very fundamental issue, I think, is very important for us to make sure that this program is an effective partner in generating more renewables.
And I agree with you, but in other testimony I'm listening to from these major providers, we are pushing something so hard right now that they're unable to keep up with what we're doing. And when you're rushing and pushing and cramming everything, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. And the people that we're trying to help ultimately will pay that. I mean, you can take a look at our Easy Pass for one example and say that, we pushed a product and we pushed a technology, and now we're getting a lot of stuff on our face right now. I just think some of these things, I think we could make a better product if we would slow down and manage it a little bit better, because we're hitting this clean energy from every side. It's just my point. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, look, yeah, that was in the great tradition of the Judiciary Committee. I was waiting for, isn't that so? It was good for you.
Well, you used to be on our committee back in the good days.
Yes, so. that back in the good days. Do you hear that?
Really?
Do you hear that? Wow.
Nice.
This
nice, gentlemen. Nice.
Shots fired. My
Yes,
goodness.
very much
All right. So let me try to bring it back on track now.
Thank you.
Let me just say, Delegate Arndt, I absolutely respect what you're saying, and I understand it. I would just say, the somewhat glacial pace at points in this process, there has not been a lack of discussion all the way along the line on all of the issues that have gone into community solar. And I have to say, we are now 7 years into this, and if there's one thing that seems to be created more than anything else is the need to have meetings on top of meetings. And I frankly think that what's needed now is a little bit more of decisive action to say, okay, this is here. The General Assembly has said that we believe that this is a worthy policy goal. Let's get on with it. And so to that end, with this, it seeks to basically say, yeah, we know this is a difficult issue, but we're going to have to address this issue and address it now.
And I just wanted to make sure, because I may have been missing a point, and I will not reflect on Delegate Aron's comments. We'll deal with him later. But isn't this just about the billing part of community solar? Because I've heard questions to lure people out to discuss all the other slowing down, all that. This bill is for consolidation of an electric bill for community solar, so you don't get two separate bills, right?
Correct.
I just wanted to make sure that we align our questions with what this bill is about. Thank you.
Your
Chair-
skill at clarifying the issues is.
Chair, I'm just reading from the testimony.
No,
That's
no,
all.
I appreciate you. Delegate Aaron, that wasn't specified at you. I'll get you later. This was
My
just
call-
in general, because I wanted to make sure that we stay on track. I know that this is a complex issue, but I want to stay on track on this bills because we have a multitude of other bills. Thank you.
Thanks.
Delegate Adams.
Mr. Chairman, just so you know, I feel like the committee's best days are ahead, and
Thank
happy
you,
to
sir. Thank you. Good to have some loyalty on the side. Thank you.
Chairman Clippinger, I guess don't we have a bill already that was passed last year that starts next year? I thought what it did is it if you're on energy assistance, you've got to be switched to standard offer service, and I'm just sort of curious.
I will say that I was focused on other issues in my committee last year, so I'm not familiar with that specific piece of legislation. I'm sorry.
I see. Well, maybe we can get it as we go on, because I guess the other question is can you have energy assistance and still have community solar? So the point is, if you don't have it, maybe it comes up with some of your panel, et cetera. So it's
That's fine.
a question, and it falls in line basically with where Delegate Aronson is headed. So,
Thank you, sir. Delegate Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, my question speaks to Chairman Stanik's testimony, and we are talking specifically about consolidated billing, but the fact of the matter is that besides some of the COMAR concerns raised, which I think are legitimate, that the PSC has raised, they specifically talk about interfacing with the service organizations and electronic data interface. They're very specific, where they say that the electronic data interfaces, the service organizations do not provide information through electronic transaction or electronic data interface. And when I look at the bill's date, the effective date of July 1st, 2022, it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like to me that gives them about 4 months to build out an electronic platform for them to be able to even transmit this data. And the service organizations aren't even doing that at this point. Am I correct?
You would, if that is what the PSC is saying, I would just say that they have been dealing with this issue within the working group. I can ask Dr. Bartlett to confirm and Ms. Heller to confirm. This has been a fundamental issue that has been discussed pretty much for 7 years. And so I think if the issue is that they need more time and they need a later effective date, I think that could be a decision for the committee to make. But I would just say this has been an issue, an ongoing issue that is not new to the PSC or to the people who have been working on this issue.
Okay, well, I'm reading the, I don't know if you've looked at it, but I'm reading the chairman has always done well coming before the committee, and he's very clear and concise in his testimony. And he's also saying that the pilot only has 2 years remaining. And I'm just wondering if, and maybe I'll reach out to the chairman and see if this electronic data transmission is sort of one of the last things or sort of the last hurdles that they're taking up. We keep talking about, they've been looking at this and looking at this, but looking at it from a whole or looking at it strategically, looking at it from point A to Z or every point in between strategically. I don't know if I'm making sense in saying that. In other words, are they looking at this as sort of the last phase of this electronic data transmission, and that's why they're talking about that and amending COMAR? Are we sort of at the last phase of this? And then they are talking about the 2-year time frame for the work group to end. So it's going to be interesting. I'll reach out to Chairman Stanek, but it seems like to me, based on their testimony, they're kind of at least close to at the end, or meeting some type of resolution. And these are some of the difficulties that are standing in their way. Wouldn't you agree?
I'm sorry, which are some of the difficulties that they haven't addressed?
The electronic data transmission, the service organizations not even providing electronic data transmission through an electronic data interface. They don't even have a platform that's able to handle that communication. They haven't built the platform that's handled that communication. I don't know. I mean, we've got this bill before us with an effective date of July 2022.
Got it.
And
Okay,
and then the COMAR amendments that would need to be made. I mean, they're relatively specific. While I do agree BG&E could be a little bit more specific, it sounds like the PSCs is very specific. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on some of that. I mean, this is not 4-month hurdle stuff.
Again, as I said before, I really believe that there really have been, I know there have been 7 years of conversations on this with people in the work group and elsewhere. I don't think that these issues are new. I think that the service providers and setting up the technological fixes that need to be done. I mean, I think that they also need guidance from the PSC to be able to do what they need to do to engage, to be able to set this up as well. But again, it requires the PSC to take a step forward as opposed to just saying we can't do it and we'll deal with it in the morning.
And maybe I'm conflating here, but I mean, I've been around just long enough to know, and I've actually signed on some of the legislation allowing community solar to even hook up just 4 or 5 years ago, these type of things. So it seems like we're moving forward with this, but we're kind of at the end. We're at this 2 years until the report ends. That would be interesting to see the full body of the report. And their concern at the end of this, even though the legislature has absolutely, we've all voted on it, taken positive action on community solar, whether it be a hookup or generation and kilowatt hours and yada, 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 and on and on and on. It seems like the legislature, working in conjunction with the PSC, is moving on this issue over the past 7 years. And we're sort of at the end to the point where we're talking about building platforms and timeframes and things and COMAR and things of those nature, the things that are more technical of those nature. And this is putting an undue, I'm concerned, and based on the testimony of Chairman Stanek, I'm concerned is putting undue pressure on the PSC and on the work group.
I understand that, and I don't really have an answer different than the ones that I've already gave.
Okay, and we have Delegate Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Chairman. My question is, I did read the bill. It seems straightforward, except for some details that I'm really curious about. And that is, if you consolidate the billing and you receive one bill, let's say from the electric company, is that who the bill is going to come from?
We come from the electric company. That's the consolidated billing.
Okay. When you got that consolidated billing, would there be itemization on the bill of how the electricity was produced? Or so, for example, would there be on the bill, this particular electricity was produced and provided directly by the electric company, this many kilowatt hours, and this amount was provided by community solar?
Yeah, and the idea being that's similar to, again, what people have when they generate solar on their own homes. They see through their own bill, through net metering, exactly how much electricity was generated in that month period.
Okay, the reason I asked is because my gut is, and this is just my gut, that when people do receive that bill, assuming the bill passes, this particular piece of legislation passes, people receive an electric bill and it's itemized, they might be surprised to learn how the solar component of their bill is not a reliable producer of electricity. They might actually learn that. I'm pretty sure they will learn that. And I think that's always been my concern, and I will say the Republican Party's concern, because the great irony of all of this, Luke, is that like all of us would have solar in our houses tomorrow, I think, if we could literally disconnect from the electric company completely. The concern is of course the unreliability of it, which we've seen. We have a war now in Europe because of this, literally because of this. But notwithstanding that, my primary question was, will it be itemized on the bill so that if you get a bill from, let's say, BG&E, and BG&E says, well, here's the electric that we provided to you from wherever the sources are, and then also here's the part of the bill and the amount of kilowatt hours that community solar provided. And I guess that's my primary question.
I would say again that the goal here would be to have a bill just like the bill that I receive, that basically has the amount of electricity I used at my home, the amount of electricity that I generated from the solar panels on my home. I don't participate in community solar. Instead of the amount of electricity that I get from the panels on my house that are consistent and pretty much provide what I need. But anyway, then you would replace that with, here's the electricity that were generated from the panels from community solar, and that's what subtracts from what you used in your house, and that I think is the ultimate goal. That would be seamless.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Fisher.
I just want to thank the chairman before we move on to our other 5 witnesses for his judiciary energy that has clearly been brought into economic matters, which is normally a very calm, cool, and collective committee. So yeah, let's go on with the next person. Thank you
very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much to my good friends from.
Thank you. Yes. So we'll go on. Places. I believe we're now on Cindy Carter, our 3rd witness.
I just spoke a few minutes ago.
Oh, thank you. I apologize. I was confused. There was such a delay. How about Shan Gordon?
Yes. Yes, I'm Sean Gordon. I'm president of Maryland Energy Savers. I help people.
Before you keep going, I don't know if it's your microphone or you sound extraordinarily loud and kind of broken up.
Let me see if I can bring it down. My apologies.
No, you're fine, sir. I want you to be able to hear what you're saying.
Is that better?
It'll do. That's fine.
I'll come down a little. Tell me when you can't hear me anymore. Are we good?
You're fine, sir.
Okay. I'm president of Maryland Energy Savers. I help people reduce their energy costs with the BG Smart Energy Savers program and Maryland Community Solar program. I also volunteer at CARES, a local food and assistance program in Baltimore, where I help low-income people apply for energy assistance. Most of them are seniors receiving small Social Security payments. Others are unemployed or receiving very little income. The $30 or $40 a month typical low or moderate income resident can save through the community solar program can be a big deal for these households as they're struggling to get by. And I really love it that this program, the policy was set up to give them extra benefit. And it's, but because of these obstacles, the director at CARES has asked me not to enroll anybody in this program. And it's frustrating and sad to see that these people are not getting the benefit that others with more resources could get. So I really hope that you will protect this policy and demand that the BGE and other utilities actually, step up and, they can do a data transfer. And what I'm hoping that you'll do is just, put a marker in, say, get it done. Okay. These poor people need your help. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Laura Peitler.
Hi.
Peltler, excuse me.
Yes, Laurel Peltier here. Hello, everybody. Thank you. I'm glad to be at the end. I can answer a couple of the questions. I'm just scrapped what I was going to say. Right now, third-party suppliers utilize consolidated billing, utility consolidated billing. And I believe what the PSC chairman was talking about is I think as Delegate Howard was saying, it is getting tactical. And third-party suppliers send in what's called an electronic data feed, an EDI feed, and it gives the charges that the third-party supplier is going to place on the consolidated, say, BG&E bill. And it would be great if we could get down, that's exactly what this bill is asking. Community solar providers, subscriber organizations are essentially third-party supply. It's just local and it's clean emission. So if we're down to those tactical levels, then let's make it happen, because there's 400,000 households right now getting EDI feeds from hundreds of third-party suppliers. What's so cool about community solar and what's such a bummer about it is it's not getting to low income at all. And it's needed, because if we're going to go to this clean energy world, this is a big part of the solution. And because a low income segment needs to get community solar this way, they're not going to put panels on their house. And remember, community solar has these deep discounts, and it can have these huge discounts. So you could lower these very big BG&E bills with community solar, have 400,000 households at least be able to access the clean energy transition. What's in the way is this very tactical issue, which is getting community solar on the BG&E, PEPCO, or SMECO bill. And it sounds like there's a lot of collaboration, and maybe extend the time, but get these subscribers to get the data feeds in so that we can sell this to folks just like a third-party supplier almost. So
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Last witness we have is James Feinstein.
Thank you, Delegate. I'm James Feinstein, co-chair of the Coalition for Community Solar Access Maryland Committee, an active participant of the Public Service Commission's RM56 working group that is actively working to improve the community solar program. And I'm the policy and regulatory lead for Arcadia, which is the nation's leading subscriber manager in community solar with more than 500 megawatts under management nationwide. I'm here today to voice my support for HB 818 and to offer some clarifying comments and a clarifying amendment. First, I'd like to clarify a couple of things that were said earlier. So with community solar, any subscriber does not have any change to their supply or delivery of electricity. So anyone subscribed to a community solar project will maintain their same electricity supply and delivery and will not have any change in how those are impacted on their bill, whether it's consolidated or not. What utility consolidated billing will do is simply add an additional line item to the existing utility bill for that community solar subscriber charge. Today, that charge is provided via an additional bill to from the subscriber organization, and that makes a confusing, complicated experience for customers who receive two bills. So again, UCB, utility consolidated billing, just consolidates the customer's traditional utility bill and the second community solar bill into one. Lastly, there's a small, it's clear there's a lot of confusion around this. And so I would like to propose a clarifying amendment to provide the Public Service Commission specificity as it promulgates regulations to act on this bill. At the end of the legislation on line 17, I suggest it be added where the utility includes the monthly CSEG subscription charge on the utility bill of CSEG's members and would remit payment received for those charges to the subscriber organization. That amendment will make it clear and precise for all stakeholders, including the Public Service Commission and the utilities, to interpret and implement. I've provided red lines to that effect in my written testimony, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. That can okay. I would say that we have Mike Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not really a question, more of a comment and a point of personal privilege. Just want to acknowledge Ms. Peltier for all the great work she's doing out in the community, helping constituents and consumers understand, their bills and really how they can save money. So that was it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Delegate Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Feinstein, will this particular bill and will communities, if it were to pass, will community solar be reimbursing the electric companies for doing the billing?
Delegate, that's a great question. So that's not clear as the legislation is written. So I assume that would be handled in the working group. The one existing model of communities of utility consolidated billing I'm familiar with is in New York. And there, yes, the community solar subscriber organizations or the projects do provide a 1% fee to the utility to compensate for handling this payment.
So you agree that community solar should pay its fair share when you have someone else doing the billing for you?
I think there is a reasonable price that, yes, the community solar companies are willing to pay for this service.
How about with respect to, like with my utility, SMECO, and most of the other utilities as well that have a separate line item on the bill regarding taking the power over the power lines? There's that itemized portion of the bill where community solar and other solar companies are putting power on the power lines. Do you think that you folks, when you're putting this power on the power lines, should pay your fair share of the use of those power lines to put electricity on them?
So as there's no active community solar program in SMECO, I actually can't speak to that utility or how they apply charges to bills. But I think in general, those are questions that have been taken up by the legislature writ large and are beyond the scope of this narrow legislation.
Do you, sir, believe that you should pay your fair share for the use of the lines? That's what I'm asking you.
I believe, every ratepayer should pay their fair share for the use of the.
This is an important question because these are the questions that we get all the time. And the fact of the matter is that I don't see where else in our economy you get to use things and not have to pay for them. And those lines are very expensive to maintain. And oftentimes they have to be improved upon, which you guys testify to yourselves when it comes to adding more solar and putting it on the grid. The grid actually has to be upgraded. So what you're saying is that it's somebody else's problem. You guys don't have to pay for it.
So I'll respectfully note that when a project connects to the grid, they do pay a significant interconnection cost to upgrade the local transmission lines to be able to accommodate the additional electricity that is injected to the grid.
But they don't pay a transmission fee, do they, Mr. Feinstein?
I think that is, they do not, but the utility also has.
The answer is they don't.
Electricity from those projects.
All right. Not really sure that was part of the bill, but that concludes the hearing for House Bill 818. We'll now go on to House Bill 796. Delegate Branch. Oh, hey, Delegate Branch, you're on mute still. Nope, still on there. Hold on, I'm gonna ask.
Okay, I got it.
Yep.
Okay, this bill, this is Delegate Branch, of course, before the House I'm getting ready to say Ways and Means, Economic Matters Committee. This bill requires transport network operators to, on request of a previous passenger, promptly return the property left inside of its vehicle. The driver or the operator must be notified within 2 hours after completing the ride, and 2, the total value of the property exceeds $100. Otherwise, the driver or operator must deliver any lost property found in the vehicle as specified to a drop-off location designated by the Public Service Commission within the political subdivision where the vehicle normally operates. The transport network company may charge a fee for returning any property calculated as specified, but not to exceed $50. PSC must impose a civil penalty or may impose a civil penalty up to $100 for each violation. Now, let me just share with the committee kind of where this comes from, but let me also share that currently I'm working with the transport company as well as the PSC to try to work through these issues. Now, this is really what's happening. I've been told on numerous occasions that people had left their phones in some of the Ubers as well as Lyft vehicles and had time getting their property back, mostly cell phones. I really didn't focus in on the issue until it was me that actually had an issue with leaving a phone in one of the vehicles, which took me about 5.5 hours to retrieve and get back. And the driver, and please note, ladies and gentlemen, that it is up to the driver. There are no penalties for him not returning the phone to you. There are no teeth that requires him to bring that phone back any particular time. He can bring it back to you 3 days later if he chose. But so I eventually had to get a number of other people involved and to almost threaten to get my property back. So in speaking with the company as well as PSC, what I'm thinking is that while we're working on this, that I'm going to be looking for measures that will help alleviate this problem. It's a major problem. And like I said before, you will not, and you cannot get your phone back. In my situation, I needed to get back from Atlanta back to Baltimore, and all of my phone information was in my phone. I wasn't even sure if I was going to really get it back. But again, I did finally get it back 5.5 hours later. So this is why this bill is before you. I'm still working with the parties to make sure that we can come to some resolution on this. But this is a serious issue when it is left up to the driver to make the decision as when you get back your property, opposed to that of the company, makes absolutely no sense to me. So I thought that we might have some drop-off locations or something like that, but PSC wasn't sure exactly how that would work, nor did the company. So we're trying to work around that, but they need to have some sort of customer call center, something. Some of these phones, as you know, can cost anywhere from $3,000 to $1,000, depending on what kind of phone that you have. So this is the premise of the bill, and hopefully we can come to, I'm hoping that we can come to some kind of resolution where this bill may not even be necessary. Otherwise, certainly there will be amendments. Thank you. Hope you find, well, I don't know if we're going to need to find it favorable because I want to work through the issues, but I wanted to put it before the committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Delegate Branch. And I don't see any witnesses, just a letter of information. So that concludes the hearing for House Bill 796. We'll now go to House Bill 835. Delegate Ruth.
Am I unmuted?
You're good.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is my first time in this committee. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you, members of the committee. This is
Hey, Delegate Ruth, you must be on the House Wi-Fi, or at least that's my guess. We have fantastic internet speed here. Let me see if I can text her. All right, I'll work through Delegate Ruth. And I apologize if you can hear me, Delegate Ruth, but I'm going to go back to Delegate Branch on House Bill 801, and we can work through your internet issues and get you back. So we'll go back to Delegate Branch if he is ready to go, and we'll take up House Bill 801.
Mr. Vice Chair, he just stepped out of the office.
Okay,
so
no worries.
back to him.
All right, Delegate Brooks, sounds like you're on though. And they got better Wi-Fi down by you than they do anywhere else. So we're going to go to 624 for you. I'll work through Delegate Ruth, and then we can go back through Delegate Ruth and Delegate Branches. So we'll take up House Bill 624. Delegate Brooks.
Okay, Vice Chair Crosby and members of my Economic Matters Committee.
All right, I lied. He doesn't have good Wi-Fi in his office. Oh. Did we not pay our bill?
To template Baltimore County. Well, I'm frozen. You can't hear me, sir?
No, we got you now. Keep going. You got
Okay.
unfortunately, now your time until the Wi-Fi goes out. So you have less than 2 minutes.
Okay. Well, the intent of HB 624 was to require electric companies to enter into a long-term contract with renewable energy facilities in order to meet the annual renewable energy portfolio standards, that's the RPS, for electricity provided to standard office service customers, that's SOS. Having electric companies contract for fixed electric rates allows for a stable revenue stream to invest in renewable energy sources. Some states like Massachusetts, Rhode Island, already have legislation and regulations requiring electric companies to enter into long-term contracts with renewable energy providers. In fact, 70% of the renewable energy in Rhode Island is provided through long-term contracts. Other states, including Maine, New Jersey, Georgia, and Alabama, all have their own programs. Alabama's one invested in projecting huge savings for their customers. The District of Columbia is investing in projects with huge saving for their customers. It's already saving money through long-term contracts, and the city government is signing a long-term contract for wind energy and projects like $45 million in taxpayer savings. Private sector companies like General Electric and Pacific Corp also enter into similar renewable energy contracts in the form of PPAs, that's purchasing power agreements. We have seen other examples of long-term contracts that have benefited customers. Southwest Airlines purchased long-term contracts for fuel contracts to provide against potential energy market volatility. So when the fuel prices shot up to historic highs in the late 20s and 2020, Southwest was able to maintain profitability while other airlines struggled. Additionally, this certainty in fuel prices also allowed Southwest to invest in their airline fleet instead of saddling their customers with additional fuel surcharges on top of an excessive energy cost. Long-term contracts for renewable power are just not additional regulation. There are practical solutions to stabilizing prices and providing certainty in a volatile energy market. Furthermore, these contracts are a key component in securing necessary financing needed for renewable projects. A stable revenue stream is a must when seeking to secure developer financing. Recognizing the concerns of various stakeholders in initiating and implementing these contracts, HB 624, as amended, will move this bill to a work group. Doing so allows additional time to focus and address the ramifications such contracts could potentially have on ratepayers while creating safeguards for additional protection. Long-term contract is another option in the toolbox that we can use to bring Maryland closer to meeting these RPS goals. Creating a work group for further development of this potential would be beneficial to Maryland businesses and customers. If we're going to build a sustainable future in Maryland, our energy grid needs certainty. Long-term contracts should be a part of that equation. For that reason, I am requesting a favorable report. Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Brooks. And this is the one you texted me, the panel. Do you have, is Andrew Gone on the call?
I am.
Go ahead, sir.
Oh, great. Well, thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Certainly mindful of the amendment to move this to a study. We certainly appreciate that change. I absolutely think this is a very valuable tool for Maryland to have in its toolbox in advancing clean energy. And I want to just, in the time that I have, really concentrate on one of the points that I've heard in response to this that I find really troubling. And that's the reference to Warrior Run as some sort of relevant point of comparison in this conversation. So just for folks who don't know, Warrior Run was a PURPA project. PURPA was a Carter era law that allowed plants to connect if they could show that they were the same as avoided cost. It's totally different from what we have brought before this committee for several years now. PURPA projects are not competitively bid. Our model requires significant competition. PURPA requires the acceptance of contracts at specific time indexed avoided cost, not projections of future costs. This, Warrior One is a 30-year contract. We're talking about 10 to 20-year contracts, totally different risk profile. Warrior One was a experimental emissions reductions technology. We're talking about wind and solar, which are very mature technologies where we've seen the cost curve come down, and we have, there's no fuel costs, so we know exactly what we're going to be paying. And finally, PURPA is, mandatory. It doesn't really allow the commission the sort of discretion that is programmed into the bill that we've brought before this committee over the past several years. What we want to see is a system where the commission, the Public Service Commission, can review, these competitively bid proposals and make a determine whether they are prudent to move forward with. So I just would question anyone who's raising Warrior Run as a talking point in this conversation. That's really all I wanted to focus on with my remarks today. I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Gregory Samillo.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Greg Samillo, and I'm a project development manager for CS Energy. We're a Mid-Atlantic based, nationally recognized engineering, procurement, and construction contractor for solar and energy storage. We have extensive experience as both a developer and a construction firm for solar projects that have been awarded long-term contracts through state programs. As proposed, House Bill 624 requires competitive solicitations for these long-term contracts. We've seen in states with these types of solicitations that we're active in, this places the burden of construction and operating performance on the developers, the technology providers, constructors, and operators. And this burden is provided in exchange for the revenue certainty with the contracts. So these programs, they encourage innovation, advancements in technology, and efficiencies from the project development and construction side of the project. So these are awarded to the most cost-effective resources for consumers. And state after state that we've operated in, we've seen these programs drive significant investment and also highly competitive energy pricing. And finally, is our experience firsthand of seeing the significant employment growth and job opportunities associated with the development and construction of solar projects backed by long-term contracts. So these programs provide a signal to individuals seek out engineering roles, project management, or construction trade roles that support the industry. And it's a similar signal that also drives local businesses to invest in equipment and the resources and business lines that can provide services to the industry. So this bill will promote the most cost-effective energy sources while also continuing the state's momentum to a 21st century energy jobs.
Thank you, sir. More ciphers.
Thank you, Vice Chair Crosby, and good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the Economic Matters Committee. I'm Maura Cyphers with Compass Government Relations, and I'm here with my clients, Merrick and American Clean Power. Thank you again to Delegate Brooks for introducing this legislation. And as originally introduced, House Bill 624 would have required utilities to seek out long-term renewable energy projects for a tiny proportion of the overall energy they buy. The goal of the long-term contracts accomplishes three important things: getting more projects built here in Maryland and the PJM region, creating jobs, and lowering rates for Marylanders. How would this bill lower rates? Well, we know sort of what the capital costs are, what the upfront costs are, and then the actual energy, wind, sun, is pretty much free. And so the key here really is that long-term contract, 10 or 20 years for the life of the project, because that's really what brings the overall cost of renewable energy way, 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 way down. And then when we know there's a guaranteed off-taker, so a buyer of the energy from the project for 10 years instead of just for 2, like we do with SOS auctions currently. So We know that these contracts would lock in rates much better for Marylanders. And to illustrate this a little bit, I just pulled my BGE bill.
Yes, I'm gonna call Attorney Wilson.
The current price for
Yes, sir. How
SOS
you
is
doing,
about
brother?
8.3 cents kilowatt hour. And Maine's got a renewable energy long-term contract program. The average cost per kilowatt hour for the projects that fit in was 3.5 cents. So, I mean, really, these projects are going to pencil out a lot better for Maryland ratepayers. I see them at time. So I think, we strongly support the idea of a work group and, please move it forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Going to favorable with amendments, Bruce Burkett.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Bruce Burkett, I'm the Executive Director of the Mid-Atlantic Renewable Energy Coalition, which we're calling Merrick Action. We are a regional advocacy organization representing utility scale solar, wind, and energy storage technologies in Maryland and across PJM grid. Merrick Action strongly supports House Bill 624 and the sponsor's amendment to the bill. A study makes sense to explore the benefits for Maryland and how other states are handling long-term contracts. We've heard some discussion about that. Long-term contracts reduce ratepayer costs. They stabilize rates. There are no fuel costs. And all the costs are known up front with a long-term contract, as opposed to we're talking traditional fuels like natural gas and coal. Those fuels are very volatile. We just don't know what those costs are for the whole length of those contracts or whole term that you're securing those contracts. There are technology advances. These contracts are competitively bid. So we lock in the low cost of renewable energy. Wind and solar are some of the lowest cost energy resources. And as you've heard, we are looking actually towards PSC oversight. So they can approve or reject the contracts depending on what they see as how the market looks. Importantly, that I wanted to say that standard offer service is generally effective, but this does not fundamentally change standard offer service. This is more like a small pilot level program that we're suggesting, and small slice of the standard offer service. Long-term contracts are like investment vehicles. You look at short-term contracts, maybe something in the mid-range, and you have long-term investments for any portfolio. So just to basically conclude, up and down the East Coast states are doing this. It's catching on. It's a really important aspect of getting projects done. And I just want to say Merrick strongly supports a favorable report on House Bill 624 with the amendment offered by the sponsor. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Arons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the intent of the bill, but one of the questions I have, if we're really sincerely looking at ratepayers, and I appreciate long-term contracts are really important, and they do fund a lot of businesses that way. I think that's a great way of expanding our ability to produce this. But wouldn't it be a great idea if we would take, like Maryland's, I think we actually can produce maybe 15%, if that, of what we need in renewable energies. Why don't we look at taking our percentages from the goal of 30, where we have to go out and purchase RECs, cut that in half and do something that's manageable, because the amount of money we spend on these RECs and the amount of money ratepayers are doing, if you could combine those two and then do the long-term contracts, I think then you have a shot at lowering rates. But as long as you're sitting up and having these lofty goals that Maryland can't possibly reach right now, they're trying, you might find a way to fund it at a lower cost for the ratepayers. Wouldn't you agree?
Okay, anyone can take that. Go ahead.
I'd be glad to take it. We do think that Maryland can reach its goals. We have developers who are very active in the state and have worked very hard to get their projects through. We're working on some siting issues through rules and regulations to improve on that so that siting becomes less of a problem in getting some of these projects done. But long-term contracts are a tool to move along and get timely compliance requirements
I
met.
think I said that. I agree with you on that. What I'm saying is because we're looking at in 2030, a 50% goal. And where we're at 30 today. And do you know exactly what we're producing in Maryland today for clean energy?
I don't have the percentage numbers with me.
Yeah, I think it's under 15%. It might be as low as 11. And I think that's kind of hard when you're supposed to be at 30 today. So you take that delta where we're supposed to be at 30, and that's our goal. We're actually spending maybe, I'll just conservatively say 15. We need to get 15 more somewhere. And we're buying those RECs from states and the PGM that isn't even remotely close to producing 100% in any one of those states that they can actually sell us that energy at that cost. So we're punishing ratepayers for something we've set a goal of that we can't achieve, and we're not taking into consideration. And I'm saying I agree with what you want to do. Long-term contracts are good. However, let's be realistic with our approach and try to get these goals. And I think you'll find lower rates will actually get people to actually help you. But, you know, I'm not arguing about the long-term contracts. I'm arguing about where we're at and how fast we can get there. We can't do it.
Yeah, well, Delegate, I can say this by us, you know, projects like, being able to provide the funding to get those and provide the funds to those investors, that would be very helpful in allowing us to try to achieve those particular goals. You would get more people investing, getting online with us.
I understand that, Delegate, and I fully appreciate it. And I'm right on board with you. I agree with that. But what I'm saying is you have a goal of 30% in front of us today, 50% in a few more years, 6 more years.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we're not going to get there, okay, unless we get people to invest. And by charging everybody more money to get to these goals that we can't possibly achieve. And again, I say this only because there is not one state that we buy renewable energy from that is producing in excess of 100% clean energy in that state. So we're disingenuously saying we're clean, or we're getting clean at the ratepayer's expense in Maryland.
Okay.
So go ahead.
Go ahead, Maura.
I was good. If I could respond, I think actually the point you're making, Delegate Arentz, is really a strong one. It sort of helps underscore the overall goal of the bill, because it's cheaper for our developers to build a project when they know BG&E is going to buy that energy for 10 years. It just brings the cost of the project way down. And so,
that, ma'am, we're on the same page with that. I agree with you 100%. I want the long-term contracts. I think that's a good idea for you. That's not
so
what
I think it'll help accelerate, our path to 50% if we can do, innovative programs like this, rather than just cutting the.
If you cut down what we're at and what we're charging people for something we can't produce and we're falsely identifying as clean energy in Maryland, you will cut our rates with that. That's all. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep, Delegate Charkoudian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I thought I knew what the bill did. Delegate Aronson's question had me questioning it, so I just want to check in. If I understand this, you're not increasing the total amount of renewable energy, but this bill would require that some of the RPS would be met by long-term contracts and the rest would be met by RECs. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes.
So in essence, you're doing what Delegate Arons was just suggesting, not putting long-term contracts on top of the RECs, but replacing some of the RECs with long-term contracts. Is that right? Replacing some of the current REC requirements with long-term contracts. Is that?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. So you're lowering our goals?
Hold on. Delegate Charkoudian, who is your question to?
My question was to the sponsor and his panel. I think that I got an understanding. Our goals are exactly the same, but now we have a portion met by the RECs and a portion met by the long-term contracts. If we want,
that is correct. Is that
right? Okay.
Right. That is absolutely correct. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And if I could just chime in, the contract construct actually allows you to secure those same RECs that you would then use for compliance, but it might even allow you to secure those RECs at what you can consider a negative price. Because we believe that with long-term contracts, you can get, let's say, call it green power for below the actual cost of brown power, what we call. So you can think of that as basically giving the REC a savings to the ratepayer rather than a cost.
Okay, thank you. Delegate Howard.
Yeah, just very quickly. So Delegate Brooks, you're looking to turn this into a study?
Yes.
Okay.
We'll be studying all of those just to make sure that the goal is not to increase the costs on the ratepayers.
I
The goal
understand.
is to
I
mitigate the
understand.
costs. Yeah. So
Would you support an amendment in the bill that would require as a portion of that study, as the state moves forward, as the state moves forward, and as we move forward with these long-term contracts, that in that study, there would be environmental impacts, such as we can only enter into contracts with companies that offer a recycling program for things like wind and solar?
Well, that's something that we could entertain, but if we send it to a work group for a study, let's let the work group be the ones who make the determination.
But we certainly are a body that gives those work groups direction, and I think an important direction would be, as we enter into these long-term contracts, part of that would be the environmental impact of these solar panels or wind turbines after 10 and 20 years, and the cost that would be associated with recycling, storing, or disposing of them. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. We'll just I've got your question. I've noted for the record, and then we'll consider that, sir.
So you would
Mr.
support an
Chair?
amendment for that, or? I think it's important question. How about members of the panel? Would they support an amendment for that? I think if we're going to do this, we should look at it from a holistic approach. And I think as we enter into long-term contracts, again, we've called on this for years and years and years. Would you support, if the bill moved forward as a study, an amendment that would allow the study group to look at viable recycling initiatives for these green energy sources?
Well, you've asked for the panel, so Bruce, I'll just offer quickly that I think it's a worthy question. I think the question itself is worthy. I just don't think it's appropriate for the study group that would be impaneled under this amendment, because I think they've got enough to study looking at just the economics. There's clearly folks at the Public Service Commission who are not on board with this. I think there's a lot of sort of meaty economic analysis that probably would go into that study. And I think adding a policy question around, panel recycling and blade recycling, I think those are valid policy questions, and we'd look forward to working with the committee to handle those questions. But I just think that they're a little bit distinct from the mandate here.
I hear what you're saying, but we can walk and chew gum at the same time. And I just think that, again, we've been asking for this for years. I've been down here, this is my 8th session, and I remember Warren Miller putting in a solar panel recycling bill for the past 6 or 7 years, and we've really kind of gotten nowhere on it. So this is really an act of desperation on behalf of trying to ensure there's some type of recycling program, even if it's just one that is verified or looked at through a study, to make sure that in some way, shape, or form, the General Assembly, as we move forward and increase our green initiatives and green energy, that we're taking a responsible measure to recycle those materials. That's all we're asking for. And I think that we can walk and chew gum at the same time. I think the study, if it goes to a study, would be able to handle that. And it was just a very clear question: would you support an amendment or not? And to members of the panel, and I got
my delegate. Yeah, I think this is going to be heavy enough for us as it is. Yeah, so maybe next time around we can't. But yeah.
That's kicking the can. All right, thank you.
Okay. Well, perhaps. Okay.
Well, we've been kicking it for 7 years.
Okay.
And now we want to go from 2 to 5 megawatts to 27,000 acres of arable land. We have no idea what we're going to do with these things at the end of the contract life, which is 20, 30 years. And you're talking about 20-year contracts. I will
welcome your bill on this next year. Okay. Thank
Chair
you.
Wilson,
you didn't welcome it in the past.
It's been quite interesting.
Yes, it's been a pleasure to watch from the outside. I will make it very clear to Delegate Howard, we are in the process of doing that. We don't need an amendment because we're working on that as part of our overall legislation. I met with Tesla just last week to see how they recycle their products, because we do and we will get something done. But what I'm not going to do is let the perfect be the enemy of the good, i.e. this is the reason we stopped doing solar, because we don't know exactly how we're going to take care of it. But because it is an issue and it's one we're going to find an answer to, We don't need an amendment for something that we're doing already. And I say that I've been doing this as a matter of cause because it is out of necessity as we move this forward with our solar, wind, and our battery storage, making sure that when they've reached the end of their life, that we're not poisoning the environment even further. So we are doing that. I've been discussing that in the last month and a half that I've been the chairman, and we will have an answer. That I promise.
All right, I appreciate it, Chair, and I don't want the enemy to be perfect of the good and all this, that, and the other either. I want to make sure it's viable and holistic in our approach.
Yes, sir.
And yeah,
I got you.
And I don't want it to limit solar. I don't want that type of stuff to limit
Yes,
solar.
sir.
That's why I was trying to look at the issue through a study.
I got you, sir. Thank you.
All right, we'll go to the unfavorables. Bill Kress.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Bill Kress here today on behalf of the Retail Energy Supply Association and WGL Energy Services. Respectfully, in opposition to the bill, I did hear the sponsor say that he's planning on a work group, and we do appreciate that. I won't get into substance. This committee's heard this bill many times. I'll just make one quick point in that what's contemplated in this bill would change the procurement process in Maryland. It would take the risk off of the shareholders, off of Wall Street, and place the risk on ratepayers. And we fundamentally don't see a reason to do that because there's so many renewable energy projects in the queue right now. PJM has such a backlog that if all of them were taking tomorrow, it would be 150% of the grid capacity. There are literally hundreds and hundreds of projects in the grid. So with that, we look forward to working with the sponsor and working on the work group moving forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kevin Moisier.
Hello, Mosier. Good afternoon.
Sorry, sir.
Oh, no problem at all. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. The commission is opposed to HB 624 as we believe it carries the potential cost impacts for ratepayers and poses implementation issues for the commission. Warrior Run was mentioned earlier, and I don't necessarily disagree with any of the gentleman's points. However, the reason we brought it up was because, as far as I know, that's the last long-term contract the commission signed. So that's sort of the, it's not an apples to apples comparison exactly, but it's, I think, the closest we have. As I think we've mentioned in our comments, we're not sure of the necessity of the 1% payment to the utilities for running this. Again, this bill would also require the commission to determine if a contract submitted is cost effective, and the price of SRECs and RECs varies greatly, and it would be difficult for us to forecast these long-term prices, without additional staffing and resources. And then finally, the date of the, we'd have to adopt regulations by March 2023, and it's unlikely we could get this done before mid 2024. And for these reasons, we oppose the bill.
Thank you, Brett Leininger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Brett Leininger here on behalf of Brookfield Renewable, testifying in opposition to House Bill 624. We understand that it is a study. Mr. Kress highlighted some of the points, and I'd just like to echo them. The only other additional point as to the demand for projects, the alternative compliance payments, or ACPs, has been very low recently, which shows that these types of projects are in the queue, and this solar energy is being purchased. So, but we look forward to working in the study and appreciate the opportunity to testify. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah Battisti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. I'm Sarah Battisti, Director of Government Affairs at NRG Energy. Our retail brands serve more than 6 million customers across North America, including here in Maryland, where NRG owns 7 companies that are licensed by the PSC to serve retail customers. NRG appreciates and supports the important public policy goal of encouraging the development of renewable resources in House Bill 624. We believe the best way to achieve that goal is to continue Maryland's long tradition of supporting that development through market-based incentives that have effectively encouraged renewable resource development for many years. Maryland's Renewable Portfolio Standards Act of 2004 established the initial structure of market-based incentives for renewable energy development, the legislature has increased those incentives over time and can continue to do so to facilitate further development. The General Assembly has considered proposals to require Maryland's utilities to enter into long-term power purchase agreements, PPAs, over the years, and they have not further facilitated renewable energy development. The proposals to enter into long-term power purchase agreements over the last decade have Maryland has wisely declined to adopt the policy. And Maryland's not alone. The City Council, the District of Columbia, and Pennsylvania's General Assembly have similarly rejected proposals to burden the ratepayers with the financial risks associated with the development of renewable resources. The competitive market is certainly, we feel, the best way to build out the renewable demand that customers are asking for. Energy strongly supports the competitive energy market and promotes innovation and better prices and services for consumers. And we look forward to talking to the working group as this bill moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes the hearing for House Bill 624. Next, we'll go back to Delegate Ruth and House Bill 835. Delegate Ruth, are you back with us?
I am, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your patience with my.
No worries, no worries. It wasn't your fault. Baker didn't pay the internet bill.
Thank you so much. So again, for the record, Delegate Sheila Ruth presenting House Bill 835. This is an issue I've looked at for several years. I've noticed, it came to my attention because of noticing an increasing number of these very large volume gas stations being developed. When the ones that have been developed in and around my district, there has been community concern about the health and environmental impact. So I really started looking into these health and environmental impacts and looking at research that's been done. And also of concern is the fact that we are trying to move away from fossil fuels and towards an electric future and how we can transition to that. So gasoline contains multiple chemicals that have known health impacts. Benzene, of course, is the one that has the most concern. It's been classified as a known human carcinogen with long-term exposure linked to blood cancers like acute myeloid leukemia. And the cancer risk is related to the level of exposure. So it's impacted by factors such as the percentage of benzene in the gasoline, the amount of gasoline released into the atmosphere and the groundwater, and the distance from the source. So there's been a lot of work long-term in terms of protecting public health from these chemicals. There's a lot that's been done on underground storage tanks. They're generally double-walled, well-regulated. Most modern vehicles are equipped with onboard refueling vapor recovery systems to capture the vapors during refueling. However, there's been some research in recent years, particularly Dr. Marcus Hilpert, who is here today, and you'll hear from him. He's done extensive research in this area, and there are still avenues where the toxic chemicals from the gasoline can get into the environment and potentially affect public health. Dr. Hilpert's research has shown that gasoline spills during refueling, when you maybe try to top it off and it goes out, or you pull it out and the gas spills on the concrete, that may actually infiltrate the concrete and or evaporate into the air. Two possible avenues that it gets into the environment, that those have greater impact than previously thought. Spills can wash off into the environment, potentially contaminating sensitive waters or residential wells. Under certain conditions, the benzene fumes can be emitted from the underground storage tank through vent pipes. And Dr. Hilpert has also done research on vehicles with onboard refueling vapor recovery systems, and that gasoline vapors can still be released from automobiles even with those. And there's also a potential impact of locating gas stations near other gas stations, that these clusters of gas stations have increased emissions, and because the amount of the exposure to benzene affects the risk, that the risk is greater when there are multiple stations near each other. And it's also problematic from a business perspective. There's one of these new stations in right next to my district. There was already a small independent station there. Located right next to the small independent station is the new station, and that hurts the business of these independent stations that are already existing. So to protect residents from the long-term exposure to benzene and other toxic chemicals, HB 835 requires new gas stations to be set back at least 1,000 feet from sensitive land uses like schools, daycare centers, playgrounds, and residential properties. And I will note that children are most at risk from the exposure to benzene. It also requires a setback from other gas stations due to this research about clusters of gas stations. In terms of the electrification of vehicles, we need to be moving towards this electric future. We are moving towards it. In fact, some electric vehicle manufacturers have announced that within the next 10 years, they're going to be moving their lines towards electric vehicles. So, we can anticipate that by the middle of the next decade, the number of internal combustion engine powered vehicles will be significantly reduced, which will of course have a major impact on the business model of gas stations. So HB 835 will also require gas stations to install electric chargers, not only to encourage greater adoption of electric vehicles, but also to help these businesses to transition so we're not left with a lot of abandoned gas stations in 10 years. And so I am working on some amendments to the bill. I've been talking to a lot of different people. One of the things I've learned is that level 2 chargers as specified in the bill are insufficient for gas stations. Nobody is going to want to leave their car at a gas station for hours to charge up. So I'm going to be amending that to require DC fast chargers, probably 150 kilowatts minimum, as based on conversations seems to be the best balance between cost and long-term value. Because of the increased cost of installation, I'm going to reduce that from 1 per pump to 1 per dispenser, which is essentially 1 for every 2 pumps. Also, I know IBEW has submitted favorable with amendments requesting that it require the chargers to be installed by certified installers. I think that's very reasonable. We want to make sure the people installing these know what they're doing to protect the safety. One last thing, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, I know you'll hear from the opposition that this should be a local decision, and it's true that zoning and land use are generally the purview of counties and municipalities, but the state has a responsibility to protect the environment and the health of our residents, and that's the purpose of this bill. And land use should not trump these important health and environmental considerations. So gas stations aren't necessary while we still rely on gasoline-powered vehicles. Until they are no longer necessary, this bill is an important step to protect public health and the environment and assist in the transition to the EV economy. And I ask for a favorable report for HB 835. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus Hilpert.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me. My name is Marcus Hilpert. I have a PhD in engineering, and I am an associate professor of environmental health sciences at Columbia University. My research addresses contaminant transport in the environment and associated impacts on human health. I was asked to provide an overview of my research on gasoline releases from gas stations and to explain why setback distances from gas stations are needed. At gas stations, unburned fuel can be released to the environment, including soil, groundwater, surface water, and the atmosphere. So why should we be concerned about these gasoline releases? Gasoline contains several toxic compounds, including benzene, and long-term inhalation exposure to benzene can cause cancers, including leukemia. In my research, we examined gasoline spills at the nozzle. We found that the relatively small droplets of gasoline that are typically spilled during vehicle refueling can penetrate concrete pavement, which at times is considered to be impermeable. However, we found that the fraction of gasoline infiltrated can even exceed the fraction evaporated, promoting soil and groundwater contamination. We also found that vent pipe emissions from gasoline storage tanks can be more than 10 times higher than what one would expect based on estimates by the California Air Resources Board. In recent work, we developed a framework for estimating cancer risk as a function of distance from a gas station, sales volume, and the number of gas stations in a cluster. Please let me close my remarks by stating that Delegate Ruth's initiative is very much needed and timely. I only filed my testimony as favorable with amendments because I still need to examine whether the setback distance and the sales volume threshold should potentially be adjusted. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, sir. Tom Clark.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I represent over 11,000 members of the IBW that reside in Maryland. I'm excited to support HB 835 with an amendment. As is, this is a forward-thinking piece of legislation that addresses green energy utilization now and in the future. Today, the convenience of electrical vehicle chargers at service stations will encourage more and more consumers to purchase electric vehicles. Years from now, when the demand is much greater and the chargers are commonplace, will we be tipping our cap to those who sponsored and supported this bill? And of course, the affected service stations will be a step ahead of the all-electric vehicle charging stations of the future. Quite simply, HB 835 is solving tomorrow's energy problems today. As for my amendment, it's only in regard to the proper and safe installation of the equipment. I encourage that installation of electrical vehicle charging stations must be performed by EVITP installers. That acronym doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, but it stands for Electrical Vehicle Infrastructure Training Program. EVITP is a brand neutral, nonprofit national training program jointly developed by auto manufacturers, utilities, energy storage manufacturers, electrical contractors, inspectors, and the National Fire Protection Agency. The training program is available nationwide at electrical industry training centers and community colleges in diverse communities, both urban and rural. As we are still in the infancy of the electrical charging industry, I hope we can get some basic safety standards for this work. And this simple amendment promotes safety for both the retail service stations and the everyday user. I thank the committee for their time and I ask that you consider this amendment and support HB 835. Thank you.
That was pretty funny. I laughed. Delegate Charkoudian, did you have a question?
No, thanks, Mr. Vice Chair.
Okay.
It was answered. Thank you.
Yep. And Delegate Pippi.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Yeah, a lot of funny quips this afternoon by everybody. So I did have a question, and maybe it's for the bill sponsor, and it was alluded to earlier, and I was reading through some of the testimony. I mean, there's a lot of jurisdictions throughout our state that probably would also be in agreement with some of your environmental concerns. And, localities obviously have zoning authority. And, you mentioned that. So why haven't they addressed gas stations or the proximity between gas stations in their own, let's say, Tacoma Park district? Why haven't they addressed it? It's well within their authority to do so. And then second, you had mentioned about spreading out gas stations. I mean, if the argument is that we don't want cars or filling up gas because of their pollutants, I mean, why would we spread that out? I mean, at the end of the day, it's one globe. I can't imagine that it's that much better to have, instead of having gas stations clustered together, to have them spread out. So if you could just maybe address that. And the last thing about the charging stations, reading some of the testimony, one of the arguments was, why add so many charging stations to these refill facilities if they're not currently needed? If you could maybe address that. I mean, look, at some point they may be needed because more people are buying Teslas and more manufacturers are coming out with affordable electric cars, which is great. But forcing companies to install those now, if there's no demand, that just seems, if you could maybe address that. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for those questions, Delegate. And I'm going to address the first and the third question. And if it would be okay if I ask Dr. Hilbert to address the second one about the clusters of gas stations, because that's his expertise. So in terms of your first question about the localities, first of all, I will say that Montgomery County has enacted something like this, that they do require gas stations to be set back 500 feet from sensitive land uses. I don't believe they have other gas stations, but that's new research that's come out since that was enacted, but they do require a 500-foot setback for gas stations from sensitive land uses like this bill has. So, at least one locality in Maryland has enacted that. But as a state, we have a vested interest in taking care of the health of our people, regardless of whether counties and municipalities do as well. If there are health impacts, those are not only human impacts, but they're economic impacts as well, and they impact on all of us. So and there are many cases where we as a state, do put in place regulations that cover the whole state to protect health and the environment. We have a lot of other regulations, and I will mention also that I do have a letter from the Attorney General's office saying that this type of setback is allowed as long as it's applied to all the counties in Maryland. It can't be, I couldn't apply it to a single county because that would be preempting local zoning authority. In terms of your third question, what was the third question again? I'm sorry.
It's okay. The electric charging stations, there was some concern from some of the opponents about mandating something that is currently maybe not needed at the moment. It may be needed later, but you could maybe address that.
Sure. No, thank you for that question as well. So first of all, it's in terms of assisting, it helps with creating demand. And you have, even though, as you say, there are more lower cost electric vehicles coming on the market now, so it's not just Teslas. But if you live, say, in a townhouse community or something like that, where you don't have the ability to install your own electric charger, and also I think that there is, when I purchased my car in 2017, I purchased a hybrid. We looked at electric vehicles, and we didn't purchase an electric vehicle because of the fear of the range anxiety. And so I think that range anxiety is a very real thing. And so I think if people know that there's a good base of electric chargers, that they are going to be able to, if they're out running errands or if they're traveling, they can stop for 20 minutes and charge up and get increased range, just like stopping at a gas station. If they stop at a convenience store, pick up some chicken while, and I think that's going to increase the adoption of electric vehicles. But the other thing is I'm looking at the long-term economic impact, and this is also something that I've been worried about for several years, that we're building new gas stations in a time when the demand for gas is going to be reduced. And so we're going to see those gas stations being needed less and less. And eventually we're going to get to a place where they don't have enough business to be able to continue their model. And it's cheaper to install the electric vehicle chargers up front than to try to remove all that gasoline infrastructure, because there are environmental impacts to removing it that have to be very carefully monitored in order to do that. And if I could ask Dr. Hilpert to address the second question.
Yeah, thank you about the question. So it was about spreading the gas stations out. So I would respond, the primary goal of this bill is to move sensitive populations away from gas stations, so that there are no schools, no churches, no residential properties around gas stations. So if we allow for clusters of gas stations, so there will be an added cancer risk. So approximately the cancer risk is additive. If you have 2 gas stations, you have about the cancer risk of 2 single gas stations and so on. And if you allow for clusters that contain too many gas stations, the proposed setback distance is not safe anymore. So that's why there is a cap on the number of stations in a cluster, or how close they can be to each other.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. And I just want to take a second here. I know many of you know Delegate Pippi's been out for a little while. I just want to congratulate him on taking the bar exam. Hopefully the test results are positive. So, all right, we'll go to the unfavorable. Mike O'Halloran.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the House Committee on Economic Matters. For the record, Mike O'Halloran on behalf of the Mid-Atlantic Petroleum Distributors in opposition to House Bill 835. Look, the setback provisions of the bill effectively ban the construction of future retail service stations at the state level in many areas throughout Maryland. Furthermore, as the point has just recently been discussed, these zoning issues have traditionally been the purview of our local governments. They are best suited through their own permitting processes to determine where and how a service station should be built. As far as a mandate to construct an electric vehicle charger for each gas pump at a new station, that provision is not only costly, but can complicate station designs. Regardless, this is a business decision for service station operators. Our rural areas, for example, have far less need for an EV charger where electric vehicle registrations are extremely low. And to give that some greater context, as of January 2022, there are only 16,421 plug-in hybrid vehicles registered in the state. That's out of more than 5 million total registered vehicles. This mandate would be premature based on market realities alone. For these reasons, MAPTA opposes House Bill 835 and requests an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. William Owen.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Crosby. William Owen, speaking in opposition of House Bill 835. For the record, I'm employed by Pentex Ventures. We're a commercial real estate development company based out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We've developed all across Maryland for many years now and invested in excess of $50 million. Within the next 24 months, we're planning to invest another $75 million for our own pipeline. And we're working with other groups that will invest another $20 million into Maryland's economy. If this bill has passed, or if it is passed as currently written, would effectively remove $70 million of that investment. We certainly understand the need to protect Marylanders and understand the need to develop regulations relative to environmental impacts as they relate to fueling stations. We also understand the need that for environmental or for electric vehicle charging stations. However, introduction of a bill that effectually bans construction of any new retail service stations throughout the entire state of Maryland is not the way to achieve either. And for those reasons, we would request an unfavorable recommendation of the committee.
Thank you. John Pica.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John Pica on behalf of Royal Farm Stores. The bill as it's written, we oppose. We would like to work with the sponsor, but there's a lot of work that's necessary on this bill. These gas stations don't happen overnight. You have to get approvals from the State Highway Administration, from MDOT, from DNR if there's tree removal or grading required, Department of the Environment, their rights away, utility rights away. It's very complicated. Some of these gas stations take 5 to 10 years to come to fruition once the land is purchased or leased. And then a lot of people depend on these stores after hours for medicine, cough medicine, for food when other stores are closed. I think the level 2 chargers needs to be changed. And I don't believe that one for every pump it's too cumbersome. It's too big. I don't think you have to wait 20 minutes for fried chicken at Royal Farm Stores. So I think the charging stations, I don't think people are going to use these. The federal government, I think, just approved a $4 to $5 billion program for putting electric charging stations in areas in the state of Maryland. I think we should wait to see how that works out. So in the interest of time, I'll stop now. I'd like to work with the sponsor if that's possible to see if there's anything that can be done to salvage the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Kaylee Locklear.
Good afternoon, honorable members of the Economic Matters Committee. For the record, Kaylee Locklear here on behalf of the Maryland Retailers Association in respectful opposition to this bill. So to start, I would also echo that the issue of land use has historically been up to local governments, and our members feel that local governments and communities are better served to enact zoning ordinances. And to respond to a comment from earlier, public health and environmental considerations do occur at the local level when these decisions are made. The bill includes a 1,000-foot setback from other retail service stations, which we oppose as well. It is typical for new entrants to develop near existing retail service stations because there is need and competition does produce customers. This bill, if passed, would flat out reduce competition. Many of the legacy retail service stations out there are not going to be redeveloped because many of the owners do not want to invest the capital, given that these are typically 20-year investments. This bill could result in the negative consequence of even less redevelopment of existing locations due to keeping out new entrants, and we ultimately support the free market. Delegate Pippi, to your points, electric vehicle chargers do make sense at certain locations, such along an interstate or a major US highway, but mandating EV chargers at all sites doesn't take into consideration demand, or that many vehicle owners are charging at home, their office, commercial shopping centers, and garages. And this bill doesn't even take into consideration any of the existing EV chargers. Finally, this bill goes into effect for stores that received final construction approvals by October 1, which does not give locations time to guarantee that they have an EV partner for opening. At a minimum, implementation should be pushed out, as each store did not budget for that at the time of approval. So I'll stop there. Glad to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes the bill hearing for House Bill 835. Next, we'll go to House Bill 801, Delegate Branch. Delegate Branch, you with us?
I'm with you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, got you.
Good afternoon. For the record, I'm Delegate Talmadge Branch, appearing before the House Economic Matters Committee to present House Bill 801. House Bill 801 is a technical bill that would alter the stride mechanism so that it operates with a multi-year rate plan consistent with how it operates under a traditional rate case. As a reminder, this bill was passed last year by this committee as well as the full House chamber. Unfortunately, the bill did not receive a vote once it made it over into the Senate. That's the reason the bill is back before you today. Coupled with a multi-year plan, this legislation provides gas companies the regulatory framework to accelerate replacement of the aging natural gas infrastructure. The bill provides that eligible infrastructure project costs collected under a surcharge be included in base rates as part of a rate adjustment made during a multi-year rate plan, with the surcharge continuing for eligible future projects that are not included in base rates. Since the Maryland General Assembly enacted the original STRIDE bill in 2013, STRIDE has proven to be an effective program for replacement aging of infrastructure at an accelerated pace to address today's safety, reliability, and environmental concerns. Under STRIDE, Maryland's gas companies have replaced hundreds of miles of outdated pipes to reduce the time to complete this crucial work by decades, but this work can still be completed faster. Without this legislation, a gas company operating under a multi-year plan must reduce its pace to avoid the surcharge cap. This would delay the work underway to timely and efficiently upgrade the gas infrastructure system to ensure continued safety and reliability. It is our responsibility as the Maryland legislature and representatives of the citizens of this state to act in their best interest and prioritize safety. This bill simply ensures that the modernization of the gas system infrastructure has the ability to advance and improve safety and reliability, regardless of the rate-making mechanism. Additionally, STRIDE has resulted in the creation of hundreds of jobs, which has positively contributed to the state's economy. Now that utilities are allowed to file for multi-year rate plans, I want to ensure that STRIDE is able to operate with these plans consistent with how it operates under traditional rate-based case. I asked you to join me in supporting House Bill 801 with a favorable report. And I believe I have a panel, Mr. Chairman.
Yep. I have three witnesses. Is it Sandy, Dawn, and John? Are they your three?
Yep.
Okay, we'll just take them in that order then. Sandy Grace.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair and Chair Wilson and members of the House Economic Matters Committee. I'm Sandy Grace, Vice President of Governmental and External Affairs for BGE in support of House Bill 801. Thank you to Delegate Branch for introducing this important piece of legislation. With me at my request are Vice President of Gas Delivery, Don White, and Director of Regulatory, John Frame. In 2013, STRIDE was established largely due to this committee's effort and leadership to accelerate modernization of the state's natural gas delivery system, prioritize safety and reliability. And the result of this important legislative effort is a program that has been very successful in these aspects. In addition, this program has and continues to confer important economic and environmental benefits. With respect to economic benefits, STRIDE currently supports over 600 full-time career jobs, including BGE employees and contractors. These investments are estimated to generate $2.5 billion of total impact to Maryland's economy, while supporting more than 14,700 jobs and more than $900 million in labor income. Accelerating STRIDE will accelerate these benefits and continue to support greater job growth in Maryland. If the STRIDE program is completed at an accelerated pace of approximately 5 years, for example, those investments would generate about additional $400 million in additional economic impact. With respect to environmental benefits, the STRIDE work reduces greenhouse gas emissions. And for example, the aggregate amount of greenhouse gas reduction relative to the current STRIDE plan is roughly 2.1 metric tons of greenhouse gases, which is equivalent to nearly 464,000 passenger vehicles driven in 1 year. For these reasons, we would respectfully request a favorable committee report on STRIDE. You have with you we've submitted the written testimony and a fact sheet detailing the benefits.
Thank you. Dawn White.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I'm Don White, and I'm responsible for BGE's gas business, and I'm testifying in support of House Bill 808 at the request of Sandy Grace. So STRIDE allows BGE to accelerate the replacement of aging gas infrastructure to provide Maryland businesses and citizens with safe, reliable, modern, and environmentally sound gas infrastructure, all while boosting Maryland's economy. Prior to implementing STRIDE in 2014, BGE estimated nearly a century to replace all aging cast iron main and bare steel main. At our current pace, BGE anticipates completing STRIDE pipeline replacement at an accelerated pace. Since the Commission approved BGE's initial STRIDE plan in 2014, BGE has invested more than $1 billion in gas system infrastructure replacement and retired approximately 300 miles of aging cast iron or bare steel gas pipeline and replaced over 70,000 gas service lines. As part of these replacement projects, we are also upgrading the system and adding additional safety equipment as a part of the overall modernization, which works to enhance the gas system's safety and reliability. While STRIDE is working for the Maryland natural gas customer, it can work even better, it can work even faster. BGE has less than 1,000 miles of gas main left to replace, and the company is reviewing scenarios to accelerate our work. This acceleration would reduce the duration of BGE's original plan by as much as 25%. Ultimately, an acceleration would still require the approval of the commission, even with the approval of this bill. However, we cannot accelerate to these higher levels and maintain the financial integrity of the company without the updates proposed in the STRIDE mechanism in this legislation. And with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, John Frame.
Thank you, John Frame.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I am John Frame, Director of Regulatory for BGE, and I am testifying in support of House Bill 801 at the request of Sandy Grace. This bill is a technical fix to align two rate-making mechanisms, STRIDE and a multi-year plan. In fact, when BGE's pilot multi-year plan was approved in 2020, the Maryland PSC told BGE in its order to come to the General Assembly to make this technical fix. Delegate Branch's bill simply aligns the STRIDE surcharge and multi-year plans so that STRIDE investments are treated the same as all other utility investments. If this bill is passed, STRIDE investments would still begin recovery in the STRIDE surcharge, but then in each year of a multi-year plan, they would be moved from the surcharge and reflected in the forecasted distribution rates, just like all other utility investments. A prudency review would still be conducted at the conclusion of the multi-year plan, again, the same as all other utility investments. When STRIDE legislation was originally passed in 2013, the only rate case option available to Maryland utilities was a traditional historical rate case. However, what was not contemplated in 2013 was how a STRIDE surcharge would coexist with the multi-year rate plan. Among other things, STRIDE provides for a surcharge to begin recovering investments at the same time as those investments are being made. Cost recovery stays in the surcharge subject to the cap until the utility's next rate case, and waiting until a next rate case to move recovery of STRIDE investments into distribution rates ensured that the prudency review of historical STRIDE investments happened at the same time as all other historical investments in a traditional rate case. In a multi-year plan, annual rate changes are approved by the PSC in one proceeding for each year of a 3-year period, providing benefits to customers, the PSC, and all stakeholders. In each year of a multi-year plan, distribution rates change to reflect the forecasted new investments the utility is making over that year, and then at the conclusion, a prudency review is performed on the actual historical investments made over the plan period. In summary, this bill would simply ensure that the PSC is able to place the safety investments BGE and other gas utilities make under STRIDE on the same level playing field for cost recovery as all other distribution investments approved in a multi-year plan. Thank you, and I ask for a favorable report on this bill.
Thank you, Ryan Washington. Excuse me, we'll now go to the unfavorables. Ryan Washington. I don't see Mr. Washington in the waiting room, so we'll go to Laurel Peltier.
Hi, Chairman Wilson, Vice Chair Crosby, and members of the Economic Matters. I'm Laurel Peltier, and I'm stepping in for AARP's Associate Director of Advocacy, Tammy Bresnahan. Tammy had a death in the family and was not able to testify today. On the AARP advocacy team, there are two of us that focus on utilities, and our job is to support AARP and stay as close as we can to policies that will directly affect the home energy utility bills of AARP's 875 members. While AARP has on many occasions during this decades-long STRIDE debate been described as always against STRIDE, that's because we knew there was a balance between accelerating the upgrading of gas infrastructure with the price tag of billions of dollars and how this will and already is directly increasing the 652,000 BG&E residential gas bills. Our main goal is to look out for the consumer. I urge you guys to read OPC's testimony. I'm not sure if they're going to be here, but it's we've been working with them. In AARP's view, this bill fundamentally changes the way the one last consumer protection of STRIDE, which was put in place in this infrastructure bill. It's the $2 monthly surcharge. As OPC describes, the surcharge is a cap of sorts to keeping spending under a limit and allows regulators a chance to review the projects and the spending to date. Over the next few decades, the $1.4 billion already approved by the PSC will eventually roll into the distribution bucket, but the surcharge in the way it's currently constructed affords a transparency and the ability for reviewers regulators to audit and survey the projects. Eliminating this speeds up the increase of the money just going straight into the distribution bucket. And if you look at page 2 of your BG&E bill, you will notice the distribution rate today is up to 71 cents per therm. And we're only 6 years into this STRIDE project. AARP Maryland respectfully opposes this bill, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. David Lapp.
Thank you, Chair Wilson and members of the committee. David Lapp, People's Counsel. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. Our office opposes House Bill H-801 because it's contrary to short and long-term interests of utility customers. Contrary to what you heard, HB 801 is not a technical bill. It has a major substantive impact. It will make accelerating gas infrastructure investments even easier than they are now by reducing the role of the customer safeguards in the current STRIDE law. Specifically, the $2 per month cap on the monthly surcharge for residential customers. The elimination of the cap's protection seems to be the main purpose of the legislation. The bill will let utilities with STRIDE programs and multi-year plans to automatically move their STRIDE investments from the STRIDE surcharge to base rates every year. Customers will still pay those charges in the base rates. And this harms consumers in at least 3 ways. First, as I mentioned, by eliminating the protection of the $2 surcharge cap. This cap is the only thing that restrains spending under the STRIDE law. Short term, HB 801 will effectively raise the monthly residential cap from $2 a month to $6 a month over the course of a utility's multi-year plan. As the PSC's fiscal note itself states, the legislation, quote, will likely impact customer bills by an undetermined amount. It will only impact them by increasing their bills, by the way. Long-term, HB 801 increases the risk of stranded costs that utilities will ultimately try and capture from utility customers or perhaps from taxpayers. The second problem is that the bill effectively eliminates the transparency that the General Assembly put in the current law for STRIDE investments. That is the surcharge, which shows up, as the previous witness said, on customer bills. That surcharge with this legislation will only include this, the current month's projected spending.
I'm just going to try.
But customers will still be paying the costs that were previously in the surcharge, but those costs will be buried in base rates and won't be seen by customers. The third problem is that the amendment would result in STRIDE program costs being moved into base rates before they are reviewed for prudence. Prudence review could have happened later, but it will be much more difficult later. And prudence review is the way that customers are protected from poor utility decision making. So it would make prudence review much more difficult. The cost will already be rolled in the rates, and there would have to be some sort of retroactive action to take imprudent costs out of rates. The bill.
So I'm going to need you to start to wrap up, sir.
Sure, I'm about done here. We're asking for an unfavorable report. I appreciate the opportunity to testify. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then finally, we have for information, Joey Chen.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Joey Chen. I'm a senior advisor to the PSC chairman. The commission submitted a letter of information for House Bill 801 for the committee's consideration. I do not have anything further to add necessarily, but I would be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have. Thanks.
All right, thank you. We will also call Fran Francis. I think you're the final witness, ma'am. Yep, I see you.
Okay. Thank you, Your
We
Honor.
got you now.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I am here instead of Ryan Washington for the Apartment and Office Building Association. And just to start, I want to say this is anything but a technical amendment. We represent commercial customers as well as master metered apartments of Washington Gas Light Company. Our association has been participating in STRIDE proceedings, multi-year rate plan proceedings, as well as rate cases for over 40 years. I urge this committee to give an unfavorable vote on this bill because, number one, it will eviscerate and virtually eliminate the $2 rate cap. That $2 rate cap was set for residential customers. However, it also protects commercial customers by the way it is calculated. So first we get rid of the rate caps, then we get rid of the commission review of reconciling the estimated costs into actual costs. Third, we get rid of the transparency that customers were promised when this initial legislation was passed as a separate line item on customer bills. And then we delay prudency reviews to several years later. There are several utilities that consistently come close to the rate cap, if not exceed it. It is a misnomer to say that the companies can't spend what they want on pipe replacement. They can. However, it's just not recovered through a surcharge. They can replace their aging infrastructure and then come back and seek recovery of it in a base rate case. To file an MRP is a utility choice. They can file a rate case, at which time they always have the ability to roll the STRIDE surges into that base rate case. Thank you for listening, and I urge very strongly an unfavorable report on House Bill 801. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Francis. That concludes this hearing, and next we will go to House Bill 569, which is Delegate Carey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Ned Carey, here to present House Bill 569. The purpose of House Bill 569 is to require energy developers to take all reasonable actions to enter into a community benefits agreement. New energy generation projects provide significant benefits and significant challenges for our communities. HB 569 is a framework for allowing our communities to ensure they receive benefits from an energy generation project. In return, the developer receives a buy-in from the community. So it's a win-win for all parties involved. The community benefits agreements are nothing new. Many energy projects include community benefits agreements. In fact, the Maryland offshore wind legislation that we passed some time ago requires a CBA agreement. House Bill 569 builds upon that legislation and follows 11 other states that also require CBAs for certain energy projects. I would say that House Bill 569 requires the developer to take all reasonable actions to create opportunities for local, small, minority, women-owned, and veteran-owned businesses, and to include career training and project safety requirements. Additionally, House Bill 569 requires the developer to pay prevailing wage for the local jurisdiction and requires the use of reasonable contractors. And as amended, HB 569 would apply to energy generation projects of 2 megawatts or greater, regardless of the type of generation. House Bill 569 also, as I said before, exempts offshore wind projects because, as I said, we already require CBAs and labor standards for those projects. So to ensure Maryland's shift to renewable energy is a just transition, we believe that the state must establish community and workforce standards for energy generation, just as it did in 2019 for the offshore wind projects. So with that, I'll wrap up, Mr. Chair. I have my panel members who are here to provide more detail and to help answer any specific questions. But again, thank you, and I request a favorable report on House Bill 569 as amended.
Thank you. Bill Kress.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Bill Kress here today on behalf of the Labor's International Union of North America, or as you may know them, LIUNA, in strong support of HB 69. I think the delegate did an excellent job at explaining the bill. It's a modest bill, As amended, it would cover energy projects, both renewable and traditional fossil fuel projects of 2 megawatts or greater. If an energy developer is going to go into a community and develop a plant at 2 megawatts or greater, they have to take, as the bill says, all reasonable actions to enter into a community benefits agreement. We think that language provides some flexibility and sends a clear signal to the developer that they need to work with the community. And really, it is a win-win situation. If the community is getting benefits from the project, the developer is going to have benefit or buy-in from the community. And we think it is something that the state should look at and move forward with. 11 other states are doing it. We see it with offshore wind. We see it with the project down at MGM National Harbor, Port Covington and Baltimore. So this is nothing new. With respect to the amendments, let me just briefly touch upon them. We did work with the Public Service Commission and environmental stakeholders and the utilities to come up with amendments, I think, that put those parties in a neutral position. The delegate described those amendments. I'd be happy to take questions about the bill. Finally, let me just say that there is a cost study attached in our testimony that shows that the cost impact is, at worst case, no more than 2%, but more likely in the 1.5% to 0.5% range. And that is because labor is a very small portion of the cost of these projects, usually 5 to 10%. And then the cost is spread out over 20 years and capitalized. I see my time has run out, Mr. Chairman, so I'll leave it there. We ask for a favorable report.
Thank you. Jeff Guido.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Jeff Guido on behalf of the Baltimore DC Metro Building Trades Council. We support House Bill 569. Solar and wind energy industry does not pay the same family sustaining wages that has been enjoyed through the nuclear, natural gas, fuel oil and coal industry. And as Maryland is intent on moving away from these fossil fuels and getting into more renewable energy, we want to have these labor standards in place for prevailing wage, apprenticeship, including the wages and benefits, participation in apprenticeship programs registered with the state of Maryland, contractors that have been compliant with federal and state wage and hour laws for the previous 3 years, and the establishment of execution for a plan for outreach and recruitment and retention of Maryland residents to perform this work, including residents who are returning citizens, women, minorities, individuals, and veterans, with an aspirational goal of 25% of total work hours performed by these residents. The application and protection of these standards will protect Maryland's working men and women and ultimately empower Maryland's middle class. We ask the committee for a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin Cosby.
Yes, thank you, Chair Wilson, Vice Chair Crosby, and the members of the committee for the opportunity to testify on HB 569. My name is Kevin Cosby Sr. I'm the owner of AC Power Incorporated and a member of IBEW. We are an MBE electrical contractor based out of Baltimore, Maryland. We have been in business for 16 years. We're proud to be a small company that helps create middle-class construction jobs for Maryland residents. AC Power supports HB 569. As a small Maryland-based construction contractor, I can tell you firsthand that requiring labor standards, especially prevailing wage on energy generation projects, will help the company compete and win work. That's because prevailing wage requirements level the playing field for reputable, high-road contractors like AC Power. Prevailing wage prevents low-road contractors from undercutting high-road contractors committed to paying decent wages and benefits. My company is a great example of how prevailing wage builds value into the infrastructure investment. Prevailing wage promotes the success of local contractors and creates jobs for local residents, both of which will help Maryland's economy. We at AC Power would love to grow our business in Maryland even more, provide even more residents with quality, good-paying jobs. The passage of HB 569 will help us make this happen. Please issue a favorable report on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric Smith. I do not see Mr. Smith in the waiting room, so we will go to the unfavorables. First up, Cyrus Tashikori.
Delegate Cyrus Tashikori was not able to stay and had to
Okay.
excuse himself.
Moving on, Andrew Gone.
Yeah. Thanks. Appreciate the opportunity. Andrew Gahn, Eastern Region Director for State Affairs, American Clean Power Association. Chair Wilson, Delegate Crosby, thanks for the opportunity to testify. I am testifying in opposition to this bill, but I'll say I don't think I disagreed with pretty much anything that folks testifying in support said. The problem is that this bill is trying to do a number of things, maybe worthy policy goals, but combining them in a way that is not conducive to getting industry support. And really, the primary objection I hear from my members on this bill is around the community benefits agreement, not really around the prevailing wage or PLA piece of it. Generally speaking, our members in Maryland that are building projects pay prevailing wage or have PLAs. But the community benefits agreement piece is very concerning, given that we just spent the last 3 years in a very sort of dysfunctional place in solar permitting as a result of this dispute between local control and PSC control. RM72 last year had a broad range of interests that were participating in that. It was kind of a permitting mess that was ultimately had to be resolved by the state Supreme Court. And so, I think when you talk about community benefit agreements, you have to acknowledge that solar projects, create a significant tax base. They provide jobs, tax revenue, climate benefits, and local environmental benefits, and they really don't require any local investment in infrastructure or anything like that. And so we would have, I think, some questions about the community benefits piece of this. And I think we should think about splitting this bill into its component parts where we may be able to find more consensus. But in general, we support several of the goals of the bill, but we can't support it in this format, and we think it needs a little more work. And with that, I'll take any questions on the testimony. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. We will now go to information. Joey Chen.
Good afternoon again, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Joey Chen, Senior Commission Advisor. In the Commission's letter of information, we did raise a number of salient points and issues of concern with the bill's original language. But again, House Bill 569 is amended, however, it does address our concerns. We do support the sponsor's amendments, and I'm available to answer any questions that the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes the hearing for House Bill 569. We'll now go on to our final bill today, House Bill 622. Delegate Brooks.
Thanks, Vice Chair Crosby and most of the members of my committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you on HB 622. That's the electricity, offshore wind, renewable energy credits, or better known as ORECs. For the record, I'm Delegate Ben Brooks. I represent the 10th Legislative District in Baltimore County. The purpose of this bill is to alter who is responsible for submitting payments for ORECs to the winning projects from electricity suppliers to electric utilities. This bill does not change how the ORECs work, only who administratively handles the payments. Essentially, under this legislation, the electric companies who serve as the payment agent on behalf of the competitive suppliers, and through a proceeding, the Public Service Commission would determine the pricing schedule for ORECs, purchases, and when payments should be collected. The utilities would enter into a joint contract with a single OREC administrator that handles accounting, compliance, invoicing, and other administrative related issues in reference to OREC obligations of the PSC qualified offshore wind facilities. Now, recognizing that offshore wind is an important economic driver for jobs and clean energy future, the General Assembly has worked hard to encourage the development of offshore wind energy. The Maryland Offshore Wind Energy Act of 2013 established that the first round of offshore wind procurement for Maryland, along with the payment mechanism,
offshore wind renewable energy credits, or RECs, for offshore wind projects under the Renewable Portfolio Standard. The Clean Energy Jobs Act of 2019, among other important policy initiatives, established the second round of offshore wind procurement. The need for this legislation arose following the delay in offshore wind projects. HB 622 intends to streamline the process. This change will provide certainty and a more practical payment structure for all stakeholders, which includes the offshore wind developers, utility companies, suppliers, regulators, and most importantly, the Maryland ratepayers. For that reason, I request a favorable report. And Mr. Vice Chair, I do have two people who are going to be testifying on behalf, and there is written support from VISTA, Retail Energy Suppliers Association, WGL, Maryland Energy Administration, and then Environmental Justice. Yeah. So if you could call up our next oral testimony, I'd appreciate it, sir.
We have 3 witnesses on the bill, and 2 are from Vistra, so I'm sure we're going to get your panel. First, I have Bill Kress.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to testify in support of this bill. Bill Kress, on behalf of the Retail Energy Supply Association and on behalf of WGL Energy Services. This bill really is common sense, and it allows for the collection of an OREC, which is not competitive based, it is a set fee. That fee is applied to all customer classes and has to be recovered and reconciled so that the offshore wind developers get the money that they're entitled to. Unfortunately, the way the bill and the language is currently in the statute, it provides for a very cumbersome process. And we were at the Public Service Commission in many proceedings trying to get a much more simplified way of reconciling this collection of the fees. Unfortunately, because of the way the statute was drafted, they did not have any flexibility. So this bill would create a very simplified process of collecting that fee by the utilities on the distribution side of the bill. And it really would be in the benefits of all the consumers, the retailers, and the utilities to move forward in this manner. So with that, I would ask for a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Christina Montgomery.
Good afternoon, Chair Wilson, Vice Chair Crosby, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comments today. My name is Christina Montgomery. I'm Director of Retail Policy for Vistra Corp., a Fortune 275 integrated energy company with operations in Maryland, here to testify in support of House Bill 622 and respectfully request that the committee provide a favorable report on the legislation. Simply put, House Bill 622 adds clarifying language to the offshore wind statute by removing electric suppliers from the administrative process and replacing them with electric utilities. This simple change makes collecting and remitting payments for offshore wind renewable energy credits similar to other statutorily required programs like the Electric Universal Service Program and Empower Maryland. In both of these programs, the utilities collect the charges on a non-bypassable basis from all ratepayers. Several proceedings at the Public Service Commission highlighted the need for this clarification and the opportunity to streamline the process. Delays in the construction of offshore wind projects have created uncertainty in the market, but since the offshore wind obligation is fixed by the Commission, this legislation gives the Commission the authority to implement a more efficient structure, which reduces uncertainty for both the market and consumers. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comments, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Katie Nash.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the Economic Matters Committee. Just wanted to draw attention to the written testimony and let you know that we are working very diligently with our partners in the utilities to get the language that they want to see in the bill. So we can expect some amendments to come forward, and we're fully supportive of that.
Thank you. And seeing no questions, that concludes the hearing for House Bill 622, as well as the hearing for today's bills. Members, I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Mr. Chair.